Ma'adim Simcha, everyone. Yesterday we talked about the first verse of the Shema, and today we're talking about the second, and it's not going to be a real verse, as we'll find out in this very beautiful explanation. Immediately following the first verse, we say quietly, Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto L'Olam V'ed. Blessed is the name of His glorious kingdom for all eternity. Although this sentence does not appear with the Shema paragraph, and is not even a verse from the Torah, the Chachamim, the sages, instituted its recital as part of Shema based on an ancient tradition. It is told in the Talmud, as we discussed a little bit yesterday, that before Yaakov Avinu died, all of his children gathered around him. Yaakov wished to reveal the end of the days, but at that moment the Shekhinah, which is the divine presence, left him and he could not show them the future. He asked his sons, perhaps one of you is not righteous, like Ishmael who came from Abraham, and Esau who came from my father Isaac, and that is preventing me from revealing to you the end of days. Everyone opened their mouths and said, Hear, O Israel, Hashem is our God, Hashem is one. That's the response that we talked about yesterday, and that's how this verse came to be. And then, and this is the addition for today from the Talmud and Pesachim, Yaakov said, Blessed is the name of His glorious kingdom for all eternity. Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto L'Olam V'ed. And Chazal asked, now what should we do? Should we recite this sentence in the Shema, even though it is not written in the Torah portion, or should we refrain from saying it, even though Yaakov Avinu said it, according to that tradition? Therefore, they established to recite it quietly, except for one day of the year on Yom Kippur, where we recite it loudly. This sentence is considered to be a continuation of the acceptance of the yoke of heaven found in the first verse, and therefore also requires Kavanah, the intention and concentration on the meaning of the words. If a person recites it without the proper Kavanah, he must go back and repeat it with the proper Kavanah, and this is again according to the Mishnah Berurah. One should pause briefly between the Olam Va'ed, for all eternity, and Ve'ahavta, the next verse, which is actually from the Torah, in order to distinguish between the acceptance of the yoke of heaven and the rest of the paragraph. Also, it is proper to pause between the first verse and Baruch Shem to differentiate between the acceptance of the yoke of heaven as commanded by the Torah and the enactment of the Chachamim, the sages, and this is according to the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah, which means that both the Ashkenazim and Sephardim agree on this idea that the second verse should be said separated from the first verse. Although the belief in the oneness of God holds unfathomable depths and meanings, we will nonetheless briefly discuss its significance. So I just spoke to a friend of mine in the morning about what Kabbalah really is, and we mentioned a few different verses in the Torah which hint to this idea of Kabbalah, and the two verses that I'll just mention very quickly are the verse when Abraham meets the three angels and doesn't at that point yet know that they're angels, and the second time with our father Yaakov, who says to Esau after 22 years of not seeing each other, Ra'iti panecha kirot pnei Elohim, I've seen your face as if I saw God. And nobody's able to see God and live, and that's in the weekly Torah portion that we're going to read tomorrow morning for Shabbat Chol Moed, which is also read for Sukkot. So the first verse, Shema Yisrael, expresses the absolute and unifying higher belief and is called Yichud Elyon, supernal unification. In this realm of higher understanding, which most of us will never reach because we have to first study the whole Torah before we can go into real Kabbalah and real mysticism, nothing else substantially exists in the world besides Hashem. He is one in His world, and we are all insignificant in relation to Him. Just one more point, both the Tanya and Nefesh HaChaim, who were written almost at the same time, and they have opposition to each other in understanding the specialness of our relationship with God, they both agree that God had to make Himself somewhat smaller in order to allow our being to be even be. And I know that sounds like a weird sentence. It's definitely not proper grammar, but the idea is that In order for us to exist in the world, Hashem had to minimize somewhat of God's presence in order to allow us to live. So he is one in his world, and we are all insignificant in relation to him. Since Hashem's infinite power is not visible to us, and that's what he said to Moses and to others, it is difficult to grasp the supernal union permanently. Therefore, only twice daily, when we recite the verse Shema Yisrael, are we commanded to rise to its level. The second verse is called Yichud Tachton, the lower unification, and by saying it, we accept upon ourselves the yoke of heaven according to the belief that it is revealed in this world. So when Yaakov responded, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Olam Vaed, he was basically saying, I now bless God, which also sounds weird because how can we bless God who has everything? I bless God for the fact that my sons are all following my way and are all in the same belief that Hashem is one. This is the belief that the world is not void, rather tangible and existent, and Hashem, blessed be He, gives life and rules over it. By His will He creates life, or God forbid, takes it away. In so doing, His name and kingdom are revealed in the world, as we say, blessed is the name of His glorious kingdom for all eternity. And if you see here in the brackets, it's quoted both Tanya, Shara, Yehud, Ve'emunah, and Nefesh HaChaim, 3 different books that discuss all of these things. Last but not least, when do we say this aloud? We say this aloud in Yom Kippur, both on the night of Yom Kippur and in the morning of Yom Kippur. And then at the very, very end in the Ilah, we say Shema, the verse of Shema 3 times, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto 7 times, and Adonai Hu Elohim, which is a verse from Kings, 12 times. That's the Ashkenazi minhag. I right now don't remember the Sephardi minhag, but the idea is that these 3 verses collaborate with each other in order to explain to us how God is unified, and there's no other power that has the same power as God. And if anything does have power, it's God giving them that power. And I'll just give one example. When the moon affects the tides in our world, it's not because the moon has any power of itself. It's because Hashem gives it its power to affect the tides. We just had a solar eclipse, which is again planned already from the 7 days of creation. And so all these things are basically to understand how we declare Hashem's reignship over us, and how everything in the world is connected to Hashem, and therefore everything in the world is in the service of Hashem. So even bad people and even bad nations and whatever else we might experience is related to that. And so I'll just go into a tiny little bit of explanation of tomorrow's reading. Tomorrow's Torah reading is about after Moses finds out that there was a golden calf, and Hashem wants to annihilate all the Jews, and basically Moses prays for us and saves us from being annihilated. And what he was doing really was he was saying that Hashem, your name, which we talked about so many times before, Hashem, your name is going to be desecrated and defiled if you in fact do kill the Jewish people. So every time that we say Shema Yisrael or Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Vaed, or both of them together, we are basically saying that everything that happens in our lives, not only in the national level, but even in the individual level, is because Hashem wants to have that relationship. And so even when Moses asked, can I please see your face? Hashem said to him, that you can only see the back of my face, which means that hindsight is 2020, and you'll understand things in the future that you didn't understand as they were happening. And in a way, it's a curse because we really do want to understand what's going on in our life. But Hashem says, no, it's a blessing, because if you really understood everything and all my calculations about how good you are or not good, God forbid, you would be terrified, and it would just shut you down and not be able to act. That's why Hashem said that you will not ever see my face, even though Moses, you were the highest of the highest in terms of prophecy, in terms of revelation, in terms of everything else that can be discussed in this spiritual realm. So we'll end with that, and just wanted to